Hi everyone, my name is Veronica and I would like to welcome everyone who joined this session. We are recording today's event, at the end of which we will answer your questions. I do highly recommend everyone to be active and ask questions in the chat box that we have for you. Don't forget to indicate your name and email address so we can contact you and our speaker can choose the best question at the end of the session and make a little gift for you. So let me present our speaker. Moises Marin is a lead systems engineer at EPAM with over 15 years of experience in IT. Moises is based in sunny Mexico City. Now, before that, he lived in a cloud city for 6 years. Moises likes cat gifts. It's a small animations with video footage, not a present. And you will be able to see his favorite cat gift in this presentation titled AWS, GCP, Azure, IBM, What Cloud Do I Need? Let's welcome Moises to the stage.
Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Hope you're enjoying today's sessions at Cloud and DevSecOps C-Days 2020. Welcome to this talk. AWS, GCP, Azure, IBM, what cloud do I need? My name is Moises Marin. I lived in Cloud City, aka Seattle, for 6 years. Wonderful city and a fantastic place to get free food and free training about cloud and technology in general. I started working in the cloud in 2012. While taking some online courses, I was introduced to the wonderful concept of virtual hosts on the cloud. I have visited the offices in Seattle of the 3 major cloud platforms, being inside, taking trainings, workshops, talked to their engineers. Funny story, I asked Azure engineers if they are adding trainings on Quick Labs soon. The answer I got was, what's Quick Labs? Great environment and great people working in these companies. Let's move on. Many questions arise when we are trying to choose a cloud provider. The first one, of course, being, do I need to be in the cloud? Is my workload suitable for the cloud? Is there value to my business by moving to the cloud, by taking my data center to this novel thing called the cloud? Let's take a step back and talk about this cloud entity. What is the cloud? What is cloud computing? What's the first thing that comes to your mind when talking about cloud computing? For some, it could be this horse, called cloud computing, who won first place in a race in Maryland in 2017. Cloud computing is a new way to consume IT resources such as storage, compute, and database. Cloud computing didn't invent those resources, of course. It's basically repackaging these existing systems so we can deploy them via public clouds. Okay, so that's cloud computing. Next question then is, do I need to be in the cloud? The answer is most likely yes, and the reason is because of the multiple benefits, like cost savings in infrastructure, more efficient infrastructure management, and many others. In a phrase, more business with less IT. The question today is not about if I should go to the cloud. That question has been analyzed extensively. For example, we have the cloud buyer's decision tree from the Open Group prepared in 2010. This tree describes 10 decision nodes and the navigation through the nodes based on whether the response to each node is yes or no. Let's traverse this tree, answering yes to all the questions, and see what we get. Question number 1, is your business situation vertical? Yes means you have vertical processes. There are dependencies between your business process, application, platform, and infrastructure. For example, your business process relies on a particular application software. That yes takes us to question number 2. Are the processes differentiating? Yes means you have processes that are integral to the business competitive advantage and you want to keep competitors from adopting. That yes takes us to question number 7. Is the application insulated from changes to the business processes? Yes means that the application is insulated. In other words, a business person with no knowledge of the application can modify the definition of the business process without impacting the ability of the application administrator to manage and maintain the application efficiently. That yes takes us to question number 8. Is the differentiation IT-based? Yes means IT is integral to the differentiation. The objective then becomes to improve IT enablement without enabling competitors to replicate the IT architecture on which the differentiation is based. Answering yes takes us to question number 9. Are the hardware OS and application custom? An example of custom hardware OS and application is a mission control weapon system. Answering yes to this question takes us to the end of our path. This is the path we just took. We answer yes to all the questions. Vertical process, differentiating processes, application is insulated, it's an IT-based differentiation, and there's custom hardware operating system and application. One example of this is a legacy application, which are not always a good fit for the cloud because sometimes legacy applications have a relatively low total cost of ownership and doesn't make sense to move to the cloud. Yes to all the questions. Conclusions, public cloud, not a good fit. A different path. Vertical processes are not differentiating, there are no impediments to outsourcing, there are no impediments to cloud adoption, and the primary business driver is cloud compatible. Then public cloud is a good fit in the shape of software as a service. This decision tree is an example of the extensive analysis that has been done to answer the question, do I need to be on the cloud? The question today is then not about if I should go to the cloud. The question we're trying to answer today is a different one. What cloud do I need? It's not an easy question to answer because the answer to this question, most like IT in general, is a form of it depends or a form of tell me more. Whether it's Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, or Google Cloud Platform, there are multiple variables to consider. It helps to look at this question from multiple angles. First, it helps to look at the trends. It helps to talk to other people and get their opinions, what pain points they are seeing, what they have tried and would like to try, to have an idea of where things are moving to and help us take a decision. Another interesting angle is comparing the cloud providers' offerings, because this can help us understand who has that specific feature or version that our project needs. The last angle will look at our scenarios. Suppose you have a business need of a global database with writes in the West Coast and reads on the East Coast with low latency and low overhead. Which database would you choose? Let's start with the trends. What are the latest and freshest cloud computing trends out there? Why are trends important? They are important because we can look at what other companies are doing, what other professionals are choosing. Having information about what products other companies are trying can help us in our selection of vendor and technology, as well as in our selection of investment strategies. Let's do a quick exercise. Imagine 10 years have passed and you ask yourself, did I choose the correct cloud platform? Would we have saved more money by going with AWS instead of Microsoft or Google? What are the key factors you'd use to assess your cloud investment 10 years from now? If it was 2006, the choice would be simpler. There was only AWS back then. Not many services were available, but the choice was simpler. By 2008, Google entered the cloud platforms arena, open to a limited number of developers and with limited features. And in 2010, we got Microsoft's Azure in the scenario. First named Windows Azure at launch, then rebranded as Microsoft's Azure in 2014. How are these three major cloud providers doing 10 years later? That is, how are they doing on 2020? For that, let's look at the Magic Quadrant for cloud infrastructure and platform services. AWS is named cloud leader for the 10th consecutive year. The Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Platform trifecta has been present in this report since the last couple of years. Here we can see it in 2019, with other players moving in the niche players field by 2020, like China-based Tencent Cloud that was launched on 2013. Here we can see the trifecta present in 2018. We can see there's consistency in the positions. Leaders are AWS, Microsoft and Google, niche players IBM, Oracle, and Alibaba Cloud. Or in horse notation, it looks like this: cloud computing and its users being the winners out of this fierce competition, which brings reduced prices, more functionalities and features to the users. What company is leading the cloud market share? This report is from June 2020. The results indicate that AWS is winning, followed by Azure and then Google. Let's look at these from the cloud spend perspective. Who's got most of the money spent on cloud services? Can you guess? As you would expect, that is AWS. The top 4 providers have most of the cake. It seems clear that in the case of AWS versus Azure versus Google Cloud market share, AWS still has the lead. However, AWS overall share of the market is shrinking very slowly, 1% from last year, while that of other providers grow, like Azure, that grew 3% from last year. AWS had the unusual advantage of a 7-year head start before facing like-minded competition. As a result, AWS services are by far the most evolved and most functionality-rich. That's a phrase from Jeff Bezos. I like that functionality-rich part because that's something that you definitely notice by the amount of documentation available and options when launching resources on AWS. What cloud vendors do tech professionals use? Do they use AWS, GCP, or Azure? This is an interesting graphic. Industry professionals were asked about what cloud vendor they are using and what cloud vendor they plan to use. Here we can see in the leftmost bars that the majority report using AWS, closely followed by Azure. Amazon Web Service dominates the cloud business with nearly 6 in 10 technology professionals already using its services, according to this report by RightScale and Flexera. About 50% of tech professionals are currently using Microsoft's Azure. This includes tech professionals like technical executives, managers, and practitioners of cloud technologies. This is a good moment to think about our question, what cloud do I need? If we looked at what other tech professionals use, we could think that AWS or Azure are the best choices, being that they are the most used by tech professionals. Wouldn't you agree? But wait, what about what tech professionals are planning to use? While Amazon and Microsoft dominate current usage, Google and VMware Cloud is still the show for planned usage, with 14 and 13% of tech professionals planning on using each respectively. What is VMware Cloud? You have probably heard of VMware software-defined data center solutions in your company. They selected AWS to run their software for private, public, and hybrid cloud environments with optimized access to AWS services. Again, if you try to answer the question, what cloud do I need? Based on what tech professionals have reported they are planning to use, you would want to take a look at Google's cloud offering, wouldn't you? Number of clouds used on average. This is a key discovery when looking at trends to try to understand what cloud do I need. On average, more than one cloud provider is used. That's right. You don't need to choose only one, you can choose more. Given this trend, it is most likely that when trying to choose a cloud provider, the answer will not be one, but a combination of providers. Why does this happen? Because you can take the best of each provider this way. You can choose where you save more money, you can choose where you find more functionalities, you can make the best out of your cloud spend. This trend indicates then that if you're like the average company out there, you'll probably be using approximately 2.2 public clouds. This slide also introduces the idea of a private cloud, which we haven't addressed yet. Let's look into that. These are the main types of clouds: private cloud, public cloud, hybrid cloud, and multi-cloud. Private cloud means the cloud is only used by you. It's on premises, you own the hardware and the software. Usually you want a private cloud due to strict security or data governance requirements. Public means resources are shared by users of the cloud platform. It's a multi-tenant situation. Someone else owns the hardware and the software. This is where we find the 3 major public cloud providers. Being public also means they support tens of thousands of users. This gives them the ability to analyze usage data and apply improvements to a very large community. Defeating malware attacks is an obvious example of disaggregated learning. Once the platform detects and defeats an attack, that configuration change can be applied to all the other traffic. A hybrid cloud is a mix of private and public cloud. For example, workloads that run on premises but require the capacity to grow as demand increases. Then the on-premises workload can use resources in public cloud to execute in a larger pool of hosts. And finally, multi-cloud, which means that you're using more than one public or private cloud platform. The most direct example being a company that uses AWS and Google Cloud Platform and has workloads running in both platforms. Now that we have introduced the concepts of private, public, hybrid, and multi-cloud, it's a good moment to explain that. The most common enterprise cloud strategy is multi-cloud. Enterprises embrace multi-cloud. 93% of respondents in this report indicated having a multi-cloud strategy, out of which 87% are taking a hybrid approach, combining the use of both public and private clouds. And a very tiny, smaller percentage of only 6% out of all those companies using a multi-cloud strategy go with multiple public clouds alone. A tiny percentage, 6%, is using single public cloud as the enterprise cloud strategy. What this means is that if you're like other companies out there, chances are you will also have a multi-cloud strategy. These are the main players in private cloud. As of the first quarter of 2020, 42% of respondents indicated that they were already running applications on VMware's vSphere private cloud services. They are followed by Azure Stack Deploys and OpenStack. We can find AWS and Google offerings lower in the positions. AWS Outpost is the on-premises cloud offered by Amazon. It allows you to run services like EC2, EBS, S3, EKS, RDS, and even EMR on premises. That's a lot of acronyms that refer to their compute, storage, container, database, and big data services running on your premises. Anthos is the one from GCP, which lets you run Google Kubernetes Engine on Google Cloud, on premises, and even on AWS. This graphic is a look into the trend of the type of hybrid cloud strategy. Hybrid cloud means that part of the cloud is private, on premises, and part is on a public cloud provider. The lowest percentage is using one public and one private. Then it is the same percentage for one public and multiple private. Then it grows into multiple public cloud providers, for example, AWS and GCP, plus a private cloud like VMware, which is the most used on premises. The biggest chunk goes with multiple public clouds and multiple private clouds when talking about hybrid cloud strategy. This means that if you're like the other companies out there and you're trying to define a hybrid cloud strategy, that is a cloud strategy that requires private and public cloud, you will most likely end up with multiple public and multiple private clouds in your strategy. Let's look now at what uses companies give to multi-cloud architectures. What the trends show us is that in multi-cloud architectures, siloed apps on different clouds is the most common multi-cloud implementation, with 55% of respondents saying they use it. Applications often are siloed on different clouds. While organizations are using multiple clouds, this doesn't necessarily mean individual applications are spanning clouds. On the other hand, data integration is the most common type of architecture that spans clouds. More than 1/3 of respondents are using more advanced architectures, such as workload mobility between clouds. Workload mobility is the ability to move applications and their associated data to a new environment with zero or very limited downtime. By the nature of their business model, cloud vendors lack incentives to make it easy for customers to move workloads out and into other environments. Workload mobility is a critical feature because it provides the flexibility to run each workload in the most optimal location and prevents vendor lock-in. For example, as an application goes through its life cycle, usage characteristics might change. It might make sense initially to run in one particular cloud environment during testing and deployment, but as the application's users grow, it might require an environment that offers better scale and performance. Disaster recovery and failover between clouds is one use case of multi-cloud architectures that result obvious. You don't want to be caught in an outage at a cloud provider platform, however unlikely that may be, without the ability to fail over to another cloud provider. Another use case for multi-cloud architecture is cloud bursting. This is a configuration that's set up between a private cloud and a public cloud to deal with peaks in IT demand. If an organization using a private cloud reaches 100% of its resources capacity, the overflow traffic is directed to a public cloud, so there's no interruption of services. Having looked at trends, let's now focus on the offerings from the cloud platforms. What are the top 3 platform as a service services used? They are Relational Database as a Service, or DBaaS, Container as a Service, and Data Warehouse. The most noticeable change is that container as a service jumped from the 6th place in 2019 to 2nd place this year. Organizations are driving this shift due to their growing interest in leveraging containers to speed deployment, scale operations, and increase the efficiency of workloads running in the cloud. These are the OS options you get from the quick start menu when you try to launch a virtual host. AWS having the most OS images available for immediate use. You have your Ubuntu, your Red Hat, your SUSE, your CentOS, and Debian available in all 3 cloud platforms. You don't get Oracle Linux on Google Cloud. You only have Windows 10 available on Azure. When it comes to size of compute, you have tons of options with names like tiny, micro, small, going from 1 virtual CPU and half a gigabyte of memory, all the way to compute using GPU, TPU, and custom sizes of virtual CPU and memory. All 3 platforms have pay-in-advance models, reserved instances, dedicated hosts, on-demand, and per-second billing. They also have options for hosts that can be interrupted at a lower cost than on-demand. They are called preemptible instances in Google Cloud and spot instances on Azure and AWS. AWS has additional options like spot instances for a specified duration, also known as spot blocks. When it comes to storage, we have our needs well covered by the 3 cloud platforms. They all require you to have a unique bucket name or storage count, as Azure calls it. Google has the additional requirements that the bucket prefix can't start with the first 4 letters of Google, nor it can contain the word Google or a typo of Google. We find different prices depending on access frequency, from standard to archive. We can find different replication levels like region, multi-region, or locally redundant. We find versioning of objects as well as encryption. Azure allows 24 characters for the storage account name, while on AWS and GCP you have 63 characters for the bucket name. When it comes to managed relational databases, you can find managed options for MySQL, PostgreSQL, and SQL Server in all 3 platforms. Managed Oracle is only found on AWS. AWS also has proprietary MySQL and PostgreSQL compatible option called Aurora that allows multi-master and multi-region replication. Azure has a wider variety of SQL Server options. The 3 platforms offer their point of view when it comes to adopting a cloud framework. You can check them out and see which one aligns the best with your own company way of doing things. AWS has 6 areas of focus: business, people, governance, platform, security, and operations. Azure says that there is no single cloud adoption path that works for every organization, but the main implementation stages are similar for all organizations. That's it. Define a strategy, make a plan, ready your organization, adopt the cloud, govern, and manage your digital estate. Google Cloud Platform builds a structure based on people, process, and technology, providing a solid assessment of actionable programs between where you are and where you want to be. Having looked at AWS versus Azure versus Google at the OS, compute, object storage, managed database, and cloud adoption frameworks levels, let's continue by looking at scenarios with specific requirements. Or in other words, what cloud do I need? Imagine you're a startup, and you know you're going to require compute for predictable workloads for a defined amount of time. You want to get cloud resources free or as close as possible to free. What cloud do you need? If you're a funded startup, you can look at the 3 major cloud providers. They all offer credits. If you want credits on a 2-year span, go with Azure. If you want to get the biggest amount in cloud credits, again, go with Azure. If you're a self-funded startup, you have one option, AWS. Not the same amount of credits they offer for funded startups, but still you get something. Or if you're looking for a free trial, all 3 cloud providers have you covered. You can try their services before you commit. AWS offers 12 months free, Azure offers 200 credit for 30 days, and GCP offers 300 credit for 90 days. If you have predictable workloads and have run out of cloud credits, remember to pay in advance for reserved capacity. This way you'll have a big discount, around half price or more than going full on demand. Just over half of AWS users leverage reserved instances, and only 43% of Azure users do so. And yes, on-demand cloud capacity is more expensive than paying in advance. Next scenario, you're an organization with no cloud strategy. Really? No cloud strategy? You are not yet in the cloud. You are looking to start. Don't want to reserve and pay many hours of cloud services in advance. Go with GCP. It has a smoother learning curve. Plus, it lets you define projects which organize cloud resources right from the start. That way you can end all resources easily and avoid waste. In order to fully realize the benefits of adopting a cloud provider, your staff may need to acquire new skills. That's where the smoother learning curve becomes relevant. Your organization will also need to create or update core processes. Hence, organizing cloud resources in projects from the start is a good idea. It will allow you to track the cloud spend. What's the best place to start? Check out the cloud adoption frameworks. The three major cloud providers outline their preferred perspectives and strategies for cloud adoption in it. This is an interesting one. You need a Windows 10 workstation in a specific city or country. Go with Azure. It's the only cloud provider offering a Windows 10 image that you can launch on a virtual host. Another one. You're a developer working with SQL Server. You need a specific version of SQL Server and access to the operating system. Go with Azure. It has a larger set of SQL Server images that you can deploy on a virtual host. Let's change that requirement a little. You need a managed SQL Server. For a managed SQL Server, the three cloud platforms have you covered. GCP has a managed SQL Server 2017, AWS has versions 2016 to 2019, and Azure has Azure SQL Managed Instance, the broadest SQL Server engine compatibility. Let's extend the managed database scenario. You want to have the capability in your organization to launch managed relational databases. MySQL, PostgreSQL, SQL Server, Oracle, and DB2. Different teams in your organization use different database engines. You need to be able to provision environments to all. This is a good example for a multi-cloud strategy. Manage MySQL, PostgreSQL, SQL Server, you get that with the trifecta. Manage Oracle, you get that only at AWS. Manage DB2, well, you don't get that with AWS, GCP, or Azure. Yes, you could spin virtual hosts and configure it yourself, but we're talking about the managed service. For managed DB2, you have to go to IBM Cloud. Remember when we mentioned there were niche players? Well, this is an example. Do you want to make your managed relational database global? That is available in multiple regions? The first option to consider is AWS Aurora, 5 times faster than MySQL and 3 times faster than PostgreSQL. This global database uses storage-based replication with typical latency of less than 1 second. An Aurora cluster can recover in less than 1 minute. Aurora cluster can grow up to 128 TB, and you can have 32 TB maximum size of tables with PostgreSQL engine. If you need more than 128 TB, go with GCP Spanner. Okay, we're doing great. We have talked about trends, compared the platforms, looked at some scenarios. Let's look at some key takeaways now. For cloud beginners, lack of resources, expertise is the top challenge. For advanced cloud users, managing cloud spend is the top challenge. 93% of enterprises have a multi-cloud strategy. 87% have a hybrid cloud strategy. 77% of organizations use cost efficiency and savings to measure cloud progress. Remember when we talked about key factors you'd use to assess your cloud investment 10 years from now? Well, spoiler alert, cost efficiency and savings are a couple of things you'll be looking at 10 years from now. More than 50% of enterprise workloads and data are expected to be in a public cloud within 12 months. The top challenge in cloud migration is understanding application dependencies. Yes, that time that you're saving by not documenting every part of the application, that will come and haunt you when you take your app to the cloud. Organizations are over budget for cloud spend by an average of 23% and expect cloud spend to increase by 47% next year. Respondents of this report estimate organizations waste 30% of cloud spend, which is higher than solar panel efficiency, which is around 22%. Organizations aren't taking advantage of all cloud provider discounting options. They are beginning to leverage automated policies to shut down workloads after hours and right-size instances. Ansible and Terraform are now the configuration tools most widely adopted. The top 3 public cloud providers remain AWS, Azure, and Google. Azure is narrowing the gap with AWS in both the percentage of enterprises using it and the number of virtual machines enterprises are running in it. Google experienced the fastest growth in adoption since last year. Cloud provider discounts offer savings opportunities. The pricing structures are complex and tricky to decipher. However, taking a close look at provider discounts could uncover opportunities to reduce costs. This is very important to remember because organizations aren't taking advantage of all the available discounts. Just over half of AWS users leverage reserved instances, and only 43% of Azure's users do so. And remember, on-demand is more expensive than paying in advance. Look at that guy. How can he do that? When did he have time to learn how to do that? That's just amazing. That's my favorite GIF of a cat, by the way. When it comes to answer the question, what cloud do I need? Identify your requirements. See how the cloud provider offer satisfies your requirements. Keep in mind that multi-cloud and hybrid cloud are commonplace among other companies. Chances are you will find those strategies relevant for your business case. Technical skills are a limiting factor. Take your time to discover what tech and cloud skills you have in your team and plan to keep those skills relevant to the platform you'll choose. Remember, lack of resources, expertise is the top challenge for beginners. Managing cloud spend becomes the top challenge for advanced users. Cloud computing is a new way to consume IT resources, such as storage, compute, and databases. And just like the horse that won the 2017 Maryland race, it's here to win. Thank you all. That's the end of this presentation.
Thank you, Moises. I think that was fantastic. I liked your GIF. I think our audience too. We do have a couple of questions, so let's start. A question from Ivan. A question about data caching. Which public cloud has the best data caching mechanisms or content delivery network availability at the moment?
Well, that's a great question. I would say that the 3 cloud platforms have a similar offering at that level. We can see all over the news when Azure or Microsoft connects data centers in different continents. And we also know that GCP has a fast, very powerful network. And well, AWS is the one that started it all. For that, I would say that the 3 cloud platforms are having similar offerings and quality of the service.
Thank you, Moises. The other question is, how secure cloud infrastructures AWS, GCP, Azure, etc., in low level and human factor? Does anyone in this infrastructure can copy or clone virtual machines or my view file storages, even AWS, GCP, Azure itself?
Sorry, voice was breaking. Could you repeat the question?
How secure cloud infrastructures, AWS, GCP, Azure, etc., in low level and human factor? Does anyone in this infrastructure can copy or clone virtual machines or my view file storage, even AWS, GCP, Azure itself?
Well, that's a good question. How secure are your data in these public cloud platforms? If you ask the cloud platforms, they will tell you that your data is very secure. They will tell you that they don't have access to your resources, and they have multiple layers of security preventing anyone from copying or looking at your data. I haven't heard about any case where there was a leak of data that started on a public cloud provider. Then again, the human factor is the one element that can break multiple layers of security. To answer your question, I would say that data is very secure and you can trust that it will be secure while you're using it. That was one of the key elements that was preventing cloud adoption years ago. How secure was it? Then enterprises started to find that it was secure. There were no issues. They were satisfied with the explanation from the cloud platforms that they did not have access to their data. Amazon went as far to say that their own infrastructure is separate from the infrastructure they use for the cloud platform. The answer then would be that you can trust it is secure based on that. We haven't seen any problem in that area recently.
Thank you, Moises. The next question is, do you think in another 5 years, Alibaba Cloud will lead the peak?
Oh, wow. That's very interesting. We saw this year a new China-based cloud provider, Tencent, joining the niche player segment. Alibaba Cloud is a very big cloud provider in Asia. It surprised me to see that it has the same market share than Google Cloud. Alibaba Cloud definitely can become a leader in that area. It has a lot of power in other continents. I can see them definitely expanding their market to other continents and fighting head to head with the trifecta for sure.
And we have the other question from the same person. Do you know which cloud has the richest automation or artificial intelligence options?
Okay, that's very interesting. Would you say that a TPU processor has more power than a custom design processor? I say that because Google is the one leading the TPU infrastructure for artificial intelligence and data mining. That's supposed to be a very efficient way to do things, and they are applying it already to their databases. It's a very great scenario where a cloud platform not only offers you the capacity to host your data and retrieve information from it quickly, but the cloud platform can also add another service on top of that where it can look at your data and find patterns and build artificial intelligence models using the same infrastructure. Based on what I've seen, I would say that Google Cloud is the one having the strongest AI service out there.
Thank you, Moises. We have a question which was the most popular in the chat, and I think you partially covered this. In your opinion, what are the most important criteria when choosing a cloud provider?
The most important criteria, I would go with cost. I think it's safe to go with cost because that's what most businesses are looking at. Yes, it's nice to have all this fancy technology and it's nice to have all those containers running and self-healing, but there will always come back to cost and savings. How much better are we now than we were before, than we were by doing things on our own? So I think that's the key factor. Might not be the most interesting technically, but it's a factor that will decide with heavy weight which platform you will end up choosing.
Thank you. How are feasible and or close to a multi-cloud solution that allows us to switch the infrastructure among different clouds, for instance, if a provider is less expensive than others? How feasible or close we are?
I think we're very close if you use the right platform. For example, if you're running containers for your applications, then it is fairly simple to take your containers and push them on a different platform. That's the convenience of using containers. Now, if you're not using containers, it becomes more complicated because it will take more time and manpower to rehost, replatform, or rewrite an application and take it from one cloud to another. There are other tools that help you, for example, to integrate data. That's an easier case where you just have the endpoints of your data distributed across a large number of platforms. Then you have a system on top of that connecting all the data sources. I think we're close for containers and for specific use cases, and then for others is not as simple because there are more dependencies to break before you can just move freely among clouds.
Thank you. The other question is, as a student, what cloud should I choose to get familiar with cloud technologies?
Okay, I like that question. I started the cloud on AWS and then on GCP and then on Azure. I think I would have preferred to start with GCP and then move to Azure and then move to AWS. That smoother learning curve is something that I've seen, definitely. When you're trying to launch things on a cloud platform, it's a different scenario that you get when you have 5 options to choose from versus 20 options to choose from. If you have 20 options, then you're going to want to understand what every option means, and it will take you more time to go through the documentation and understand that, compared to just going with a smaller set of features. Based on that, I would definitely recommend starting on Google Cloud. They also have a lot of free trainings and information that you can try. That way, you could start learning about the cloud, and then you could transfer transfer that knowledge to a different cloud platform and then to the other one. And I would definitely leave AWS to the end. You might be tempted to start with AWS, being that it offers you a 12-month for free. But in my experience, having gone through that situation already, I would definitely start on Google.
Thank you, Moises. Julia is asking how complicated it would be to set up and try Microsoft Azure. How much time to schedule in case I need SQL Server?
Could you repeat the question, please?
How complicated it would be to set up and try Microsoft Azure, and how much time I need to schedule in case Julia needs to try SQL Server?
Okay. I think it depends on how much experience you have with the database and with the cloud platform. If it's the first time you're using a cloud platform, it might take some time. Definitely not a lot of time if you have that key use in mind. Going to Azure, and the first time you have to register there, it will ask you for your Outlook ID, and after that you will reach the portal. So by that time, it's been probably about an hour because you forgot your credentials and you had to reset your password. So once you land on the Azure portal, then you have to launch a service. You would go and create a resource group and then add your SQL Server in there. Now, depending on the kind of SQL Server that you're launching, if it's a database that exists on the cloud, if it's an image that you'll be having access to the operating system, that's going to take more time. But let's say you're going with a managed SQL Server because you want to try it out. And launching it, well, you have to specify the size of the instance class and then the network security. You have to make it available to your IP so that you can access it from your home. That could be probably another hour, I say, if you want to take it really slow and look at all the details that you're configuring. After that, your SQL Server is going to be up, and then you're going to try to connect to it. So you're going to have to install that SQL Server Management Studio if you don't have it already, and then you'll be able to connect. So I'd say a couple of hours, most probably, just to start and launch and then be able to connect to it.
Thank you, Moises. The other question is, which clouds would be the best choice when considering integration with an open source or on-premises systems?
Best integration for open source and on-premises systems.
That's right.
I would say that the 3 cloud platforms have you covered with that. I would probably look at which one you are already using or have access to and extend that service on that cloud. Now, if you don't have the functionality, you'll probably want to look at, I would say, AWS, because after you set up the direct connect and all, you set up all the connections to have on-premises connected to the cloud. It's a breeze to extend to any other use case that requires a hybrid cloud.
Thank you. Andre is asking, how is it important to be a multi-cloud engineer in the latest years from your point of view?
Wow, I think it's very important, and surprisingly, it's not that hard. It's going to be hard when you start learning about the cloud and all the concepts of it. But once you have dominated or have acquired medium level skills in a cloud, transferring that knowledge to other clouds, it's simple. You might find another roadblock when you try to learn about private cloud providers and providers outside the major stream. Because they do things in a different way, or you will find a lot of new terms and names. But I think it is very important to be a multi-cloud engineer nowadays, for sure. And mostly because when you're working in a company, the scenario you'll find is that you have an application running on Azure, and then you have another application running on GCP, and then you have another application running in a different cloud provider, and then you might have a database that is split between on-premises and a cloud provider. So it definitely helps to be a multi-cloud engineer. And the best way to do that is, well, starting with one cloud and then trying to do the same things on a different cloud. And you'll be surprised to see that, well, you might need more clicks, but the overall idea is there. So I definitely would say, don't be afraid to be multi-cloud, embrace multi-cloud just as companies do.
Thank you. Great answer. Rajiv is asking if there is an EPAM standard cloud selection guide or checklist available, and has customers used it?
I haven't seen such a checklist. I might be tempted to say that Azure might be that one based on the number of trainings available or the push for Azure challenges to have people certified in that technology. But I haven't seen such a checklist or a recommendation, no.
Thank you. What is the best way to gain knowledge of cloud services, for example, AWS?
Okay, I'll tell you how I started on that front. On 2006, that's when AWS celebrated 10 years. And this service or this page called Quick Labs gave all their AWS courses for free for a month. I thought, wow, I had to take all of those in that month. I did not manage to take all of those because it was like a lot, but I did take a large number of courses and spent a large amount of time looking into that. So I would say the best way to start is by checking the providers that have courses for that particular cloud. There are some free that you can get at well, YouTube basically, or you can get the free trials or Udemy or Linux Academy or what's the other one? Cloud Guru. They all serve the purpose and they all have different prices. They rent. I think they start around $50 per month or so. In my opinion, that those are the best places to start, especially if you can afford those. You get a lot of hundreds of hours of trainings that you can take at your own pace. You can even set the speed of the video if you are a fast learner and you want to go through more videos in a day. I've spent a lot of time in those platforms. I've tried all of them. And so my recommendation would be to find one of these platforms that have video on demand trainings and start there, definitely.
Thank you, Moises. That's a good suggestion. Nikita is asking which strategy of gathering knowledge about clouds is the best. Should typical DevOps engineer deeply know all of them at once in the best case, or is there any benefits of doing so?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Which strategy of gathering knowledge about clouds is the best? Should typical DevOps engineer deeply know them all at once, or start one by one?
I would say definitely start one by one. You want to reach to a point where you're comfortable with one technology, and that's when you move to the next one. If you have the similar use case, it doesn't hurt to practice the same skill in the three platforms. For example, if you manage to create a bucket and also have a website using that bucket, then you can try that same skill in another cloud platform and see what are the differences. So the strategy I would recommend definitely is, well, going one by one if you have the time, and if you are focusing on specific skills or features, then you can try that same feature in another cloud. It's really simple when you have like a browser and you have the 3 tabs opened and one on a different cloud provider, and you go through each one and doing all the steps. That can even save you some time.
Thank you. And we have the last question, but not least. What does it take to set up cloud infrastructure in a university, and which cloud provider should be considered?
Could you repeat the question, please?
This question is about the university. So what does it take to set up cloud infrastructure in a university, and which cloud provider should be considered?
In a university, that's an interesting
if there is
scenario.
a specific requirement.
Right. Well, I would definitely see how many hours of human how many human hours you have available for that task. I mean, if there are chances that if you have the knowledge and the manpower to set up an open source platform, that would definitely be fantastic from the learning point of view. Now, if you are going with a public cloud provider, I think that that would take some time for planning, and it will take some analysis of how much budget you have, because, well, it will cost more, definitely. My recommendation would be to look at the open options first, and then look into the major cloud providers.
Thank you. This is all questions we do have for now. Moises will choose the best one, and we will contact the winner and award with a little gift. Thank you very much, Moises. I think that was a fantastic talk, fantastic presentation, and thank you everyone who was able to find time to join. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Have a good one.